Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking MySpace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. Welcome back to School of Emo. I am really excited because we are going to recap the A Day to Remember Yellowcard Maximum Fun Tour that just started. I was at night 2 in Toronto, and it was the second night of the full tour. It's still really off to the start. And so if you're listening to this, I hope that you maybe check it out. I think a lot of shows are already sold out, but there are a lot that are still available. And so if you like these bands and you weren't sure about it, TLDR, it was great and worth going to. A really fun time, worth traveling to. But we're going to get into the venue. We're going to get into mostly, we'll talk about some of the other openers, but mostly the Yellowcard experience, since that is one of my favorite bands. That's the whole reason that we actually went. We will talk a little bit about A Day to Remember, their set, and just the experience of the night and the tour as a whole. So to start us off, we saw them at Budweiser Stage in Toronto. I don't have a lot to say about this in relation to other venues in Toronto. My first time ever even going to Toronto, seeing a show there. And so I don't have a lot to say really about much else as some of the shows that we travel for. But the stage itself, I think it's located sort of out of downtown, and the area it's located in is really beautiful. It's on the lake. And so there's boats, there's the water, there's a really beautiful like greenway going alongside the water. We stayed at a hotel that was right across from the stage, across the water. So we didn't have to utilize public transit or anything to get there. We were there's the soccer stadium kind of also across the river. We were a little bit away from that, but I could see people like walking to the show. So I'm assuming that transit possibly let out on the other side of the soccer stadium, and then people walked across. There's like a little bridge that goes across the main road there. You can also cross the road down at the bottom. The bridge itself to cross the road was terrifying. It was wooden slats. And especially after the show, I really regretted going on that bridge because it was completely full of people. That was probably the worst experience about walking there. It was not very fun, but great view of the water, great view of the stage as you're walking over the bridge, which is kind of cool. And then there's some space underneath, but a really beautiful area with lots of green space. Something that really surprised me with you and being in Toronto as a whole. I didn't know how like green it actually was. And so that was a nice welcome surprise with it all and really cool. The stage is outdoors. It is sort of an amphitheater style. Some of it is covered. So the standing area is fully covered. Most of the seating area is covered. We were in sort of the top tier seating. So they have like the standing kind of pit area, the lower tier seating, and they have where like the crew and stuff would be for lights and everything. And then we were kind of right above that. And then they have a lawn. So tiers up. Where we were seated, we were still technically covered. And so that's kind of nice if you're thinking about weather, rain, all those things. That helps. There is a lot of cover if you sit in the lower areas, which is nice. One thing I wish is that you could see the water. I get it because it was built onto the grass, because they have the lawn part of it. And so I think that's probably why, but you can't really see the water from the from the amphitheater. That would have been a really nice feature because it is so beautiful. And even the bands, as they're playing, they're not really seeing the water at all. Because again, they're down, it's amphitheater versus like a rooftop type of stage. When you look at it from the outside, it looks like it would be a rooftop stage, but it's not. It's amphitheater. And then there are There are some things kind of on the other side of the stage, which would be facing the road. Maybe that's the green rooms, maybe VIP suites, things like that. I'm not really sure. But it was very beautiful. And I'm sure the bands had some nice views from those rooms if they had that. They had, when you walk in the gate, so they have two different gates. You walk kind of into the main gate where you go through security, and then they have a second kind of gate that has the tickets. And then you walk into this kind of outdoor, like food truck looking area. It's like a big park with food trucks kind of throughout, and it goes up, sort of up to the top of the seated lawn area, and then there's kind of food trucks and things all along the way. There were a bunch of porta potties at the very beginning. I thought that that was the only way to use the restroom, and it was pretty far from the actual seats, and everyone was using them. So I assumed that that was the only option at first and was a little bit stressed about that. But there were actual bathrooms like connected to the seated areas that were fine. So a little tip. There are porta potties, but there's other space as well. They did have water refill stations. I think you might be able to bring in your water bottle. I'm not sure. We didn't attempt it. I didn't bring a bag or anything, but they may have allowed that, which is nice. And then they had a decent amount of like food options, drink options through those little stands. So kind of the basics, burgers, pizza. They had a poutine stand, which is the Canadian version of that. They had a barbecue stand, a bunch of random things. From a health perspective, I wouldn't say there were a lot of options. But as a vegetarian, there was a veggie burger, so I had that, but it was totally fine. There were vape shops, which I thought was really interesting. The amount of smoking as a whole in Toronto, I don't know why it threw me off so much. I think it throws me off in a lot of cities how younger people are smoking a lot more. I don't love that, but there were a lot of people smoking. And the smoking areas just seemed to be outdoors. Like even as I was waiting for my burger, everyone around me was smoking as they were making the burgers, which is kind of disgusting. Like felt a little trashy, but whatever. I think it was a fairly small space, so I'm sure they just didn't have a lot of like room for different smoking areas. I don't know what the deal was, but lots of smoking. And then the vape booths were interesting. So I guess that's a big thing there. For some of you, you may love that. I didn't necessarily love it, but it was fine. I didn't really see a lot of people smoking in the seated area where we were during the show. So that was nice. I was scared that that would be the whole thing or like the really smelly, like chemical smell vapes, which I don't enjoy, but it was fine. So they do have that there though. So if you're interested in that, they had two main merch stands. So one kind of as you walk in up a hill a little bit. The other one was sort of inside, like tucked. There was sort of a tucked in area that was more connected to the seated area, and it was not as full. So that was an option. When it came to the bands and the tour itself, we didn't buy any merch. Like we planned to buy a poster because we collect posters from the places we travel. There were no posters, and that was really frustrating. I don't know why there were no posters, especially to have two big bands on the tour plus some decent openers. I don't get it. And then Yellowcard merch, I love the merch I own from them. I love some of their older merch, but it was all very similar of like the little side pocket, small graphic on the front with like a bigger graphic on the back, even to their hoodie. They were all the exact same. And so they had some decent designs. I just personally don't wear that design. I prefer like a front graphic tee only, or like a big front graphic and back graphic possibly, and they just didn't have that. A Day to Remember had some decent merch and some other like options. It's just not a band that I would really wear. I have too many t-shirts, so didn't end up buying anything. Really wanted a poster. Went in the middle of the show to look for one, but they didn't have one. So that was a bit frustrating. Probably something that might come out later in the tour. Maybe it just wasn't available yet, or maybe they just decided not to go that route. Maybe both bands don't sell enough and that's why, who knows, but it wasn't there. But they had decent areas for merch. The crowds themselves, we didn't get there really early. We got there kind of right at door open. But there were people who were lining up a lot earlier. So I'm guessing more of the people who were hanging out in the pit in the standing area, but it wasn't like a rush, crazy, like manageable amount of people, big venue, but not too big, that kind of experience where it was much more casual than some of the shows that we've been to recently, especially like My Chemical Romance at a stadium. This was much more approachable. There was no real waiting in line. As soon as we walked up, we pretty much got into a short little line, went through security easily, went through the tickets easily, got to our seats, got food easily. All of it was a very easy process. And people were fairly nice beyond the smoking. So not too bad. Overall, decent experience with the venue. The seats were okay. Again, we were in that kind of second tier option. We did have a bit of an obstructed view, which was not communicated, which was a little upsetting. We had a big pole kind of near us, but overall it was fine. We only had one row of seats in front of us, and then we had that kind of walk space. And because it's tiered up like an amphitheater, great view overall. So we only missed like little moments where that pole was in the way. I just wish that would have been listed on the tickets when we bought them, but it's okay. We were kind of in the middle. And then one thing is that even though it is tiered up, I'm 5'4", I'm pretty short, but not that short. And sitting in the seat, when someone sat in front of me, I couldn't see over their head and they weren't really that tall. So the seats themselves do kind of have a bit of an obstructive view. I would say it's a venue where you need to stand even in the seated area if you want to see well, or sit in the front of each row. And I don't know if it was like that in the lower tier options too, but that is how it was in mine. Or if you're really tall, maybe you're okay. My husband's much taller and he sat for most of the show. He doesn't like blocking people too much when standing, versus me, I'll stand for a show that I really want to be part of. Thankfully, no one sat in front of us during the first two openers. And so we got to sit for those and just relax. We've been walking around the city all day. So that was nice. And then stood for all of Yellowcard and all of A Day to Remember. But I kind of had to, because you couldn't really see, even with the person in front of me never standing. If I sat, I couldn't see very well. And then with that obstruction in the way, it just kind of made it tough. There are two screens. You guys know I care about the screens, because if you're going to sit further back, you got to have a good view of what's happening. And the screens were kind of small, like an amphitheater. So very much similar to what I experienced with Dashboard and Goo Goo Dolls in Nashville, or Brand New in Atlanta. Like a lot of these amphitheaters have a similar setup. And so the screen was good quality, which was nice, but definitely small. Thankfully, from where we could see, like where we were seated, we could see fairly well of like at least the figures on the stage, depending on the lighting of each set, which we'll get into. But they did have some screens. I just wish they were a bit bigger, and then they showed more of the stage and kind of interacted a little bit more. That would have been nice. If you were all the way back in the lawn area, I think it would be a lot harder to see the stage, because we were, again, much closer than that. And we still had a little bit of a struggle seeing that. One thing that is cool is you can't see the water, but there is kind of the surrounding part of the venue as you're looking down at the stage, then everything's kind of covered everywhere else that you're looking at. There are little like window slots throughout. And from where we were seated, you could see the CN Tower kind of perfectly in one of the slots, which was kind of cool, especially traveling to Toronto. It was like a nice little experience, fun for videos, things like that. So that was a nice feature. And then one thing that we did not fully prepare for is how cold it would be, because the wind off of the water was very cold. So if you're going during months where it's a little bit chillier, where the temperatures are starting to drop, I would expect it to be colder than what it looks like on the weather if you're not used to it, because I did get a little cold. Thankfully, for the sets that we were standing up for, it was fine. And it was great because we weren't sweating, which was a nice relief after so many of the shows we've been to this summer. But it was cold, and I had a leather jacket, but I wish I'd had like a long sleeve and a leather jacket, or like more layers than what I had. A lot of people were in sweats, which would have been really comfortable. It's just not what we packed with us. So we're not fully prepared for that, which I had like a beanie on, all the things, but it's okay. We survived. It was fine. It was better than being hot, but something I just didn't think about it until we were there. And I was like, yeah, this makes sense. I wish I would have considered this. But the people in the pit, I'm sure they got less of the breeze because they were further down and, again, more surrounded and covered. But I'm sure it felt nice being able to be that close. And it was very packed in the pit, to have a little bit of a breeze coming through in cooler weather. I'm sure that felt really, really nice. All right, so let's get into the sets and the show itself. One thing with this tour is that there are kind of two main openers, and then we have Yellowcard and then A Day to Remember. So every show will have Yellowcard: A Day to Remember, and then two openers that shift. So I think there's like two pairings of openers, and they vary based on the tour. And so for our show, we had Boundaries as our first opener. They played about a 30-minute set. It was really only about 20 to 25 minutes, but I'm assuming they were slotted for 30. And then we had State Champs who played about a 45-minute set. Yellowcard was around an hour, a little over that. And then A Day to Remember was around 90 minutes. So tiered in that way. The show started kind of early, not that early, but it is a very long show because of all of the openers. I think the other shows I can't remember the other who's replacing Boundaries for the other shows, but instead of State Champs, some shows get the Wonder Years. So some pretty decent openers, especially for the price and kind of the tiers of that. It's sort of festival like in a way, which is kind of cool, especially if you enjoy a lot of those bands. You get a lot for your money, which is great. And overall, every band did a phenomenal job for our show. Like I enjoyed it, had fun. It was great. Again, worth the money, worth the trip. Boundaries, they're a band that I've never really heard of. I've never listened to. They're definitely a little bit harder, so more of that screamo, if you will. There's lots of screaming, so a bit heavier. They had a lot of energy, which was nice as a first opener. I didn't fully know what they were saying, but that's okay. There were a decent amount of people who were really into it, which was nice to see. And we were able to sit through their entire set and to be there. We ate during their set, but it was great. High energy, enjoyable. Jeremy from A Day to Remember, when he came out and he was, thinking the openers, he made a joke about how someone must have really hurt them. Like they're really pissed off about something. That is kind of the energy they gave. Very heavy. But again, I have no idea what they were actually saying. But they brought the energy, and the crowd was less than halfway full at that point. But they did a good job of interacting with the crowd, getting the crowd into it, excited, like engaging, all of that, especially for only 25 minutes. So very good. State Champs came on after that. We have seen State Champs a couple of times on the emo cruise last year. That was the first time I'd ever seen State Champs live. Definitely very pop punk. I would say more aligned with A Day to Remember and some of their newer stuff, like very good pairing of that style of music, more on that poppy side. Not my favorite. They kind of came into the scene like a little later than me, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm on the cusp of the age that I would have been really into that. And I wasn't listening to newer stuff at that time. I was definitely leaning back into the Yellowcard, Story of the Year, the Used, the stuff that had come around a few years earlier. But they did a really good job too. Lots of energy, very similar to how they sounded on the cruise. Like they have so much energy, very engaging. Their songs are catchy because they have that poppiness to them. And so they had a good crowd energy, and the crowd started filling up a lot more for their set. And so people were really into it. There were lots of people standing, singing the songs, dancing. The pit was, there were crowd surfers, like all of that was already starting to go on for their set, which was great. And again, blended really well with A Day to Remember. Also a bit of Yellowcard, like kind of was a good pairing, blended very, very well. Compared to Boundaries, I feel like if they went straight from Boundaries to Yellowcard, very different. So having, I think, the poppiness in between was nice. And then Boundaries plus State Champs kind of blends that A Day to Remember sound, which has some heaviness to it a little bit, especially the older stuff with more of the poppiness of the new stuff. So very good, worth it to see. I don't know what they played in terms of what albums. I can't really speak to that because I'm not a big fan or anything. I haven't done a deep dive into them, but their songs are catchy. And I know some of them just from being on the cruise and prepping for the cruise last year. And so it was fun to sing along to what I knew, dance around to it, and enjoy it. And then that led us into Yellowcard. So as you know, whenever I covered the Yellowcard episode, I've listened to Yellowcard since the beginning. I love all their albums for a different reason. I'm enjoying some of their newer stuff. I like some of the older stuff more, but I was hopeful for some really good songs and a lot of their high energy songs. I've seen them live a couple of times now, and I love their higher energy songs live. They're fun. You can dance to them, you can sing them. There's lots of repetition, which is really fun in a crowd to be able to sing back and kind of repeat things together, chant type of experiences. I find that really fun for a live show. And they brought those songs, which was really great. So they opened with a Top Gun guitar opener. Their new music is very much leaning into nostalgia, especially of the 90s. So, Better Days is the big album. Their setup was set up that way. They had a VHS tape up, Yellowcard across that. They had a lot of like neon look lights that looked like CDs on the in the back, and so they definitely were leaning into that nostalgic 90s, even late 80s vibe. And so coming out, each like member kind of coming out a little bit at a time and adding to that Top Gun guitar opener made sense, and it kind of leaned back into that. They did draw it out a little long. It was kind of like, okay, like once Ryan got out, I wish that they would have like quickly just flipped it into like a high energy song. I think that would have been really strong and powerful and like really fun where people could just like, and go right into the music. It didn't. It was kind of drawn out a little bit long, but still very cool. And I'm sure the band enjoyed it. It seemed like they had fun with it. And even like the addition of the violin, because a very cool cover of that kind of Top Gun guitar starter. If you liked that, that was one of my favorite movies growing up. So I loved it. I just also wish it would have been like flip right into like a high energy song. It didn't, but that's okay. They did start with Only One though, and that was so interesting to me because it's just not what I would have expected them to start with. Like usually they save that towards the end because it's one of their biggest songs, but it was smart in the way that it got the crowd singing and excited. So if they are playing in front of crowds that are a little bit more geared towards A Day to Remember, I think as more of an opener, it makes sense to start with a song that people are going to really connect to quickly. Maybe that's the reason why they did that. I don't really know, but it kind of it is one of their energy songs. It doesn't have as much energy. Like if you're an Only One listener, I like Only One. There's so much better like songs to like really scream and enjoy than just Only One. Only One, Ocean Avenue, they're amazing. Of course, they're iconic and classic for a reason, but there are also some really incredible songs in their discography and in their music. So I wish it was something else. Like even Lights and Sounds, I like that as a starter, but it's okay. Only One worked for the crowd. It just didn't necessarily flow into them walking out. So maybe that could be better. Probably something they may continue to improve too as the tour goes on, because again, this is only night two, but it was really fun. So Only One, a lot of seats were still empty at this point. I think people coming in for A Day to Remember, it definitely got more full and filled up for Yellowcard. So some people were standing, not everyone was standing. I stood the whole time and sang every lyric to every song. A handful of people around me stood, not everyone did, which was really interesting. No one seemed to get angry about it or anything like that. Again, my husband kind of halfway, he sort of sat up on the seat a little bit to kind of be with me, but not block anybody, but mostly sat. So I was just kind of dancing on my own there. After that, I didn't take note of every song played. Like they definitely played a lot of the big hits. So they played Lights and Sounds. I think they played Rough Landing Holly. They played a lot. I kind of zoned out and just danced. I took some videos. I really did not take that much. They played Way Away, they played Breathing, a lot of the big ones. Breathing is one of my favorites too. It's like the spinning, it's a fun one to dance to and enjoy. But one thing that was really interesting, kind of leaning into some of those like early 90s references, is they did play Keeper. And Keeper is one that they used to not really play live. Whenever we went to their comeback tour a couple of years ago now, Ryan Key, we had the VIP experience. So you got to go before the main set, in between, like with their sound check, and they played some acoustic songs and they played Keeper. And Ryan mentioned that they played it like once live early on in the early days of Ocean Avenue. And then they just kind of stopped, or not Ocean Avenue where it fit in, but they stopped playing it because it does sound a little silly, like the things that he has to say, and the way he has to say things. And so he's like, oh yeah, we didn't play it, but acoustic, it works. And so he can kind of change it. Well, this tour, they brought it back and they played it. So really interesting. It is a great song. So I'm guessing it's because the fans love it. They love it. Lyrically, it's great. And Orion wrote a lot of those lyrics. Maybe he just came to terms with it. Sounds maybe a little silly to sing, but we all love it. And so it's worth singing. But before that, he came out and had like a trench coat holding up a boombox over his head. I saw pictures of this from night one and I was like, oh, that's how they're going to start the whole set because that would make sense. But it was before Keeper, so kind of mid set. And that was a throwback to the movie Say Anything with, I think, John Cusack. Correct me if I'm wrong, from 1989. So again, really more of those earlier 90s type of throwbacks. One thing that they did do, again, probably because it's only night two, but with all of these different references, there was a lot involved. The lights were very involved. The like little theatrics, small things that they did. They talked before some of the songs, but they kind of left the stage a lot. That drives me crazy. I hate whenever things feel so disconnected. I think it's really powerful whenever a band's able to just like blend their songs into each other. I think that's a really professional set. I don't know why. Maybe they had to switch out guitars. Like I'm sure there's probably a lot involved with that. Maybe it was just building up stamina with like the tour. Maybe it's because that they added so many extra things and that's just how it needed to work. I'm not sure. There wasn't huge breaks, but they definitely left. And there were at least 15 to 30 seconds, between songs. And some of them did kind of stop and then we restarted, which I don't love, but they had these little things throughout. So that was really nice. And then again, some of the songs had introductions to them, especially the songs off the new album, which were being introduced live to a crowd. And so being able to talk through those, celebrate Better Days, especially being at number one on alt rock radio charts right now. And so that was really fun to get to have those little bit of tidbits and celebrations. They did play 3 songs off of their new album. Honestly, Bedroom Posters and Better Days, which is great. So really leaning into the new music. I think that's important because they're about to release the album. It's coming out very soon. Even the day before, we weren't there in time to do this because we got in later Saturday afternoon. And then Saturday morning, they did a pop-up at a record shop where you could sign up and it was like a meet and greet. And I think everyone got to listen, like secretly listen to the new album, which was cool. And if you pre-ordered the album, you got to stand in line and do like an autograph thing with them, which is very cool. So that was really neat. I wish we could have been a part of it. We just didn't get there in time, so it wouldn't have made sense, but it seemed like a really cool experience. And then the record shop did like a plaques for the band to celebrate them being at number one for Better Days. So very cool, like that they had that experience and then we all got to sing it and enjoy it. People were really into it, which was really exciting to see the new music get so much attention versus just The Only One or Ocean Avenue. As a fan, that makes a huge difference. So that was really cool. They did end with Ocean Avenue, which makes sense. It's the top song. Crowd got super into it. Everyone enjoyed it as always. And they didn't play anything off the Childhood Eyes EP, which was really interesting. I love Childhood Eyes. I love 3 Minutes More. We've talked about that. I don't know if they'll ever play that live. It's a hard song, it seems like, to sing live. It also features Vic Fuentes from Pierce the Veil. And so I think he would need to be in there to add his like higher range, but they didn't play that. They also didn't play Telescope and Hollywood Died, which are the 2 I love the most, but it's okay because they played so many songs from all the different albums combined, which was nice to see. And again, I knew every word to every song, got to dance, got to sing. I will never take that for granted because there were years where that was not an option and now it is an option. And it's so much fun to music that you've loved for so long. And so great 10 out of 10 experience. Again, this set was about an hour. I wish they were the main person. So we got 90 minutes. We probably could have gotten some more of those songs, but that's okay. It's not how it works, but we did get a full hour and it was high energy. People were into it. I was into it, loved it, had a good time. And then we went into A Day to Remember. And so I saw A Day to Remember partially at When We Were Young. And I talked about this on my recap of them, of how we left a little early and I regretted it. And I wish that we had been there for more of their set. But they started with Downfall of Us All at When We Were Young. And it was so powerful. I was in the standing area in the crowd and it was just like so much energy and the entire crowd just erupted with that drop, that iconic drop. And so I told Alex, my husband, I was like, there's no way they don't start with the downfall of us all. Like, it's such a good start to a set. It's strong. It's the start you want where there's like that knowing of what it is, right? The band's coming out to something that we know exactly what it is. And then there's a drop where everyone just erupts and goes crazy. Like that's what every band should do, right? That's what we all want, and that sets a set up to be like top tier. They did, which was exciting. So they did start with the downfall of us all. It wasn't as strong as when we were young, but I think it's because I wasn't in like the pit and in the standing space. I think that makes it very different. And you can tell me if you agree or not, because I think something I'm learning, especially as I've gotten into, like, I've never really been a pit person as a short, high anxiety person. I have some hypermobility issues. Like I can stand fairly long, but it is really hard for me to stand and dance too long. Like it's tricky. So it's not something I've really done much, but doing a festival kind of for the first time with when we were young last year or 2 years ago, year and a half ago, last year, and then doing the emo cruise where I was able to stand and kind of be more in the mix because it was a smaller crowd. I think I get it of why some experiences are so much different than others. I stand at shows to try to get that experience as much as possible and like stand for sets because I feel like you're more connected to it. And what you experience is worlds different than what you experience, I think, sitting or kind of just spectating, like leaning back. And so I think what I experienced with them in this show, it felt a little less energy, but I think it's because the people around me weren't as into it. And I wasn't in the middle of that crowd, which was so strong when we were young. But the sound, like Jeremy's voice is amazing, like the band is amazing. Like it wasn't that they did not do it as well. I think it was just my experience of it. But they did start with Downfall of Us All. Crowd was really into it. People did start standing, like more people got into it than the sets prior, which was really exciting. They did have like their stage setup was pretty cool. They had this like two-tiered screen, so a back screen. Then they had the drum and like a stage where they had fans. And I thought they only brought the fans out maybe for the first one or two songs. The whole set, fans were standing there, which was pretty cool. I tried looking up like how people got that, of like what was that. I couldn't figure it out, but it was really cool. So fans were kind of standing on the stage the whole time, and then there was a screen on the front of that stage and kind of built in together. The screens had an image of a mountain, and A Day to Remember was like carved into the mountain. And that stayed steady the entire set. But each song had a different experience around the mountain. So they had a storm, they had flowers and a pretty day. Like they just had all these different things on this mountain shifting, kind of like seasons or days. And that was really cool. I think it helped with some of the cohesion of the set as a whole, but it really brought a lot more to each song and like the experience of it because it was pretty big and involved. So instead of a bunch of lights flashing everywhere, it was like really easy to see. The difference between them in Yellowcard, for Yellowcard, like there were lots of lights behind them, like all the neon lights, very cool, very fun. But it was really hard to see the band members because there wasn't a good light on the band members. So even though we could see them and see their silhouettes, even some of the videos I got, it's like you could barely see them because of the lighting compared to the screens gave you a little bit more. With A Day to Remember, you could see them a little bit more clearly because they had their lights set up different. So that was really cool and nice. And the fans on the stage were interesting touch. I'm sure that was a cool experience to have. They did also have some fun camera work. So Jeremy is like a fun kind of hype, vibey type of dude. And so there were many parts where he would like look down and the camera's looking up. So it like gave you that perspective, and then they'd like flip the camera. So watching the screens was really fun. Again, added another layer to the set, even though Jeremy's not one that's like jumping, dancing, going all over the place. Like it added a lot more energy to their set, which was really cool. So I really enjoyed that, especially for that more amphitheater, smaller experience versus like a big stadium where you tend to get a lot more of that involved. It was good for them to add that in. I think it shows, again, professionalism. It shows what they invested into, and there's some creativity, but I think also their experience. They did play a handful of songs from their new album, but they also did mix in a lot of other songs. They didn't leave the stage. They didn't do an encore. They kind of joked about how that was kind of dumb and everyone's over it. And so they're not going to do that. But they played a full 90-minute set. So we were able to get all the hits. They even seemed to pull from their archive a bit, songs that I didn't know those who were bigger fans seem to know and get really excited about. And so that was really cool to see. And then they did play a decent amount, I think like 4 songs from their new album, which is fine. Like I don't love it. I mentioned in their recap, I was curious how it would be because their new album has such a range of different styles where it's like there's a hip hop influence. It looks like a country influence. There's more of a pop influence. And then they have like the harder stuff. The performance was definitely better, I think, than the recorded because his energy and like he built in some of the screams and the heaviness kind of into the songs, even those that are a little bit lighter, which was cool. And again, just the energy of the crowd mixed with it makes a huge difference in the music and what you hear. So very well done. Very well done. If you're the same as me, where you're like, I don't know so much about the new music, and it seems like they're leaning into that a bit for the tour, it was still very good and worth it. I think they've been leaning into that. The crowd seemed to be more aligned with that. So maybe you love it anyways. But if you're not sure, it was still worth it. Very fun. And if you can grab a ticket, grab a couple of friends and go have fun. Like it's a fun show, easy to be at, fun, like wear your sweats, have a good time, sing the songs. Very good. And that was it. We were down by like 11. I think we got there around 6-ish, home, quote unquote, to our hotel by 11:15. And it was great. Such a good experience. I'm really glad we went. And I can't wait to see Yellowcard again. I want them so badly. One, I want them to come to Nashville. Like Josh Portman in the band lives in Nashville. They do a lot of stuff in Nashville. Ryan used to live in Nashville. They don't play in Nashville for some reason. But I would love to see them come play at like a smaller, intimate venue just because I think it would be so fun. Like I would pay more to be able to see them at a more intimate venue with like all Yellowcard fans, sort of mimicking that final tour experience. Like I don't know if they'll lean that way. I know they are enjoying opening for some of these really big bands, like they did with Third Eye Blind last year. And that's great. I'm so happy for them. I also want just like an intimate experience again because I know it's so good. And outdoor venues are fine. The sound's never as good as it is in those smaller spaces. And I think it would really, really hit hard with their music and their style. So please come back. If anyone connected to Yellowcard is listening to this, please come to Nashville, play somewhere more intimate. Maybe we could do Brooklyn Bowl. That would be amazing. Maybe the Basement East, like something good and vibey just for the plot of it. Or maybe play multiple nights if you need to. I would go to multiple nights. I think anyone who's really a fan would. Whenever they did the comeback tour in New York, we stood in line by other people who traveled from Nashville because we didn't get a show. We got a Third Eye Blind one at an amphitheater far away from the city. So come back into the city, please, please. Headline. You're there. You can do it. So anyways, next week, we are going to go into Sleep Token because my next show in less than 2 weeks from now is Sleep Token. And I know they're not really emo. They're not really emo. So after that, we are going to get back into the roots of emo, some of these more leading bands. There's a lot we still need to cover. Jimmy Eat World is one on there. I think Since It's Fail, like there's a bunch of bands out there that we need to start going into. I get it. I hear you. I'm with you. I've been taking some detours with my shows because I think it's fun to recap them and prepare for them. This is as much for me as it is for anyone else to be able to learn about these bands that I get to see and experience them on a deeper level. It's the whole point of this. So we're going to do that with Sleep Token and talk about where they fit in. Where does metal, new metal, maybe? I don't know. Where does that fit in when it comes to emo and alt rock or pop punk and all these other spaces? We'll talk about it and then we'll talk about their show and then get back to our roots. And then it's almost time to start preparing for the emo cruise because that is coming up and it is a packed, jam-packed set list. There is, the Used and Under Oath, which we've already covered here before. Love them. And I will be seeing the Used again in November. So maybe I'll recap that part of those like 3 albums, 3 nights tour. But there's some other bands that we haven't really gotten into. So a lot of opportunity to start learning about those bands as we prep for the cruise that will come in January. So lots coming. If there's anything that you want to see, you want to learn about, you think I should learn about, please let me know. Comment on this, let me know. And then if you want to come on the podcast, if you want to share something, if you've seen a show recently, or you're like, you're not talking about this band enough, you're not talking about this topic around this whole space enough, you're not talking about this point in history enough, please come on the show. I would love for you to share your expertise, your experiences, what you love, your fandom with me and with this little community on the internet. So you can email me. It's in my show notes, or you can message me on socials. Not very active, but email is great. I do check it, and I would love to have you on to add to this community. So with that, I'll see you in our next class.